Adaisa's head thumped in her chest as she crouched behind the thick reeds, the river's cold spray soaking her worn skirt. A shrill cry echoed across the water, not of any bird or animal she had known, but something deeper, haunting, almost human, yet impossibly wrong. The sun had barely pierced the fog, and the shadowed banks of the river whispered secrets she was never meant to hear. Her children's laughter from the nearby village seemed miles away, replaced by the sickly metallic smell of fear that hung over the riverbank. Adais peered through the reeds, eyes wide, as two men in torn leather and mud-streaked boots dragged a figure with glistening scales that shimmered with every hue of the water. She froze, every muscle screaming to run, yet her heart refused. The figure, a mermaid, small, her belly swollen with life, eyes brimming with terror, reached out with delicate hands, pleading silently. The hunter's knives glinted cruelly, and Adais realized this was not an accident, but a hunt. Sweat and river spray mingled on her skin, her mind racing with the impossible question: could she save this creature without being caught, without her life or her children's safety being thrown into peril? Her own mother had warned her. The river carries spirits of those who dare to touch the wrong thing. Yet the mermaid's trembling gaze pierced her soul. Fate had chosen her witness, and perhaps something more. Adaisa's hands trembled as she wiped mud from her palms and considered her choices. She was a poor woman, her life already a precarious balance of survival. Her children's mouths to feed and school fees to scrape together, yet every instinct of compassion burned through her fear like fire. The river whispered as if encouraging her, its waters curling around the fallen branches, carrying the mermaid's faint, sorrowful cries to her ears. Adaisa knew the villagers would not understand. Even a whisper of her involvement could turn the community against her, branding her a mad woman or worse, a witch. Still, she could not leave the mermaid to the hunters. Gathering her courage, Adaisa crept closer, every step measured against the snapping of twigs and rustle of leaves. The hunters were distracted, shouting and arguing over the shimmering scales that promised wealth beyond reason. Heart hammering, Adaisa seized a fallen branch and clattered it against a rock, startling the men. In the chaos, the mermaid shivered, her tail flicking water into the reeds. The river seemed to swell in response, a pulse of unseen power urging Adaisa forward. She whispered, "Hold on, I'll get you out." With the hunters momentarily distracted, Adaisa dashed forward, yanking the ropes binding the mermaid's delicate wrists. Her fingers cut and tore at the cords, the mermaid's silver hair clinging to her mud-streaked hands. The creature's warm, frightened gaze met hers, and a faint tremble of trust passed between them. One hunter turned just as the last rope gave way, his roar of anger slicing through the morning mist. Adais grabbed the mermaid under her arms, half dragging, half carrying her toward the deeper reeds where the hunter's vision could not reach. The river itself seemed to rise against their pursuers. Roots twisted like serpents, branches snagged boots and clothing, and the mermaid's tail lashed water at their assailants in flashes of silver light. Adais stumbled, nearly losing her burden, yet a strange strength filled her, as though the river itself had chosen to shield them. By the time the hunters recovered, the pair had vanished into the thick undergrowth, leaving only the echo of a desperate, otherworldly cry behind. Adaisa's lungs burned, her arms ached, but in the mermaid's eyes she saw gratitude that transcended words. The danger was far from over, Yet a fragile alliance had begun. They found refuge beneath an ancient Iroko tree, its roots forming a natural hollow. The mermaid shivered, her tail flicking water onto the moss-covered ground. Adaeze pulled a worn blanket from her satchel and draped it over her new companion, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself. She had lived her life scraping survival from the soil, but now, sitting beside this mystical creature, she felt the weight of destiny pressing against her chest. There was more at stake than mere survival. Some invisible force had drawn her into the river's secret, entwining her life with the fate of the unborn mermaid child. The mermaid spoke for the first time, her voice like the ripple of a stream over smooth stone, trembling yet melodic. They want the child, they want me, and the river knows. Adaeza felt a chill, realizing the hunter's intent went beyond greed. They sought power over life itself. She glanced around the forest, noting the birds that seemed unusually silent, the shadows that shifted as though watching them. Her fear grew, yet so did her resolve. She could not, would not, allow harm to come to this innocent life. She made a silent vow beneath the Iroko. If the world would not protect the mermaid, she would. By nightfall, Adaeze had returned to her small hut, carefully ensuring the children were asleep before sneaking back to the forest hollow. Every step through the darkened paths felt like trespassing into the unknown, the wind carrying whispers she could not entirely decipher. Somewhere between the rustling leaves, the water's murmur, and the crackling firelight, she felt eyes, hunters or spirits, she could not tell, tracking her every movement. The mermaid's condition worsened, her cries soft but urgent, pressing the urgency into Adaeze's mind. 7 days' worth of decisions had to be made in mere moments, and each one carried mortal risk. Yet even as fear gripped her, Adaeze noticed subtle signs that the forest itself favored them. A fallen branch would subtly guide her path. A fish leaping upstream would distract an intruder. It was as if unseen hands were aiding their flight. The mermaid whispered of a hidden cove deeper into the forest, a sanctuary known only to her kind, where danger could not easily reach them. Adaeze's mind raced, weighing exhaustion against determination. The life she had known was gone. She was now a guardian of something miraculous, a protector of a secret that could shift the balance between the natural and supernatural world. When Adaeze returned home for supplies, the village buzzed with rumors of missing hunters and strange lights near the river. Mothers clutched their children. Traders whispered of silver scales glinting in the water, and old men muttered curses and prayers alike. Adaeze's heart sank, knowing any mention of her intervention could bring fatal consequences. Yet as she hid the mermaid in the forest, she realized secrecy was no longer enough. Trust would be essential. The village's suspicion was a living shadow, stretching into every corner, threatening to reveal their sanctuary. Her own children were the first to sense the magic. At first they recoiled, mistaking the mermaid for some spirit sent to harm them. But the mermaid's soft voice and gentle gestures gradually melted their fear. Adaeze watched as her home, her modest dwelling, transformed into a place of quiet wonder, a bridge between the human and the mystical. She understood that protecting the mermaid was no longer merely about evading hunters. It was about fostering belief, nurturing trust, and guiding the innocent through a world that feared what it could not understand. On the 7th night, the hunters returned, fiercer and more relentless than before. They had tracked faint signs, footprints, broken branches, and whispers among villagers. Adaise hid in the hollow, clutching the mermaid's hand as the forest seemed to hold its breath. The hunters' voices, sharp and cruel, cut through the night, demanding the child and promising death to anyone who interfered. Every sound, the snapping twig, the rustle of leaves, the mermaid's quickened breathing, was magnified, each one a dagger of suspense. Adaise's mind raced for a plan. She remembered the river's strange currents, the hidden tunnels beneath the banks, the old stories her mother used to whisper. Drawing on both cunning and desperation, she whispered a command to the mermaid. Together, they slipped into a secret waterway beneath the forest, the hunters' shouts fading into the distance. Adaise's lungs burned. Her arms ached from holding the mermaid steady, but a new determination had ignited within her, a certainty that no force on earth would separate them from the child waiting to be born. Days passed in the hidden cove, the mermaid's strength slowly returning. Adaise learned to read the subtle language of water, the way currents shifted to protect or warn, the soft glow of bioluminescent plants marking safe paths. When the child finally stirred within its mother, a luminous pulse echoed through the cove, as if the river itself had blessed the birth. Adaise, exhausted but awestruck, realized she was witnessing not just a life being born, but a covenant between the human and the mystical. The mermaid's eyes shone with gratitude, and Adaise felt something she had never known, a bond that transcended fear, danger, or mortality. She held the newborn, a being with scales like polished silver and eyes that reflected the river's deepest currents, and understood that her choices had ripple effects far beyond her humble village. Every act of courage, every whispered prayer, every risk she had taken had led to this moment. And as the river's waters embraced the mother and child, Adaise felt a quiet certainty. Destiny had chosen her not just to witness, but to protect. Word of the miraculous birth eventually reached the village, but the tale was shrouded in awe rather than fear. Those who came near the cove felt a subtle hum of life and power, a gentle warning that the waters were sacred, protected by something beyond mortal understanding. Adaise stood at the river's edge, the mermaid beside her, knowing that their secret had become a legend in its own right. Villagers, initially skeptical, slowly accepted the magic as part of the natural order, an acknowledgement that the world was far greater than the daily grind of survival. Yet threats remained. Hunters still prowled the edges of the forest, driven by greed and envy. Adaise, now wise to both human and mystical dangers, taught the mermaid and her child the ways of the river, the language of currents, and the guardianship of the land. Her life was forever intertwined with the supernatural, a delicate balance of protection, secrecy, and courage. The river, ever patient and alive, became both a shield and a teacher, reminding Adaise that destiny was not merely given, it was forged in the choices one dared to make. Years passed, and the child of the river grew under Adaise's careful watch, learning the rhythms of water and forest. The villagers, once fearful, began to see the child as a symbol of hope, a reminder that bravery and compassion could reshape the world. Adaise's own children learned that courage was not measured by wealth or status, but by the willingness to protect life against impossible odds. And every dawn, as the river shimmered with silver light, she remembered the first cry that had pierced her fear and reshaped her destiny. The hunters never returned in full force, perhaps wary of forces they could not comprehend. Adayas, now a quiet legend among the villagers, understood that saving the mermaid had altered her fate, her family's, and perhaps even the course of the river itself. The child thrived, bridging worlds, a living testament to the power of empathy and courage. And in the heart of the forest, the river continued to whisper, carrying tales of the woman who had dared to defy danger, who had chosen compassion over fear, and who had learned that the greatest strength sometimes lies in the willingness to stand for what is vulnerable, magical, and sacred.